Well, hello, and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Attlas Alux, and today I welcome you to another episode where I had hoped to premiere the presentation on Atlas 3. Not Atlas 3.0, on Human 3.0. But this presentation is proving to be more daunting and more Herculean a task than I had originally anticipated. So I'm going to continue along on the theme of Human 3.0, but on the rubber meets the road practical level, because there's no point in talking about upgrading to Human 3.0 and a trinary human being and being a triune human being, a true human being. All of this is wonderful, but at the end of the day, we have to know how to do it. There has to be a practical methodology. Rubber meets the road. What do I do? Not just day in and day out, but moment by moment. Because this upgrade process is not some instantaneous switch. It's not like a software update that you just download and you're done. It is an ongoing process to upgrade oneself from being a binary, dualistic, mechanical, rational hominid to becoming a triune human being, one who is able to reconcile all of the apparent opposites, all the apparent dialectics, not just in their life, externally in the world, but also in their own mind. Because lately, I've been encountering many people who, for one reason or another, seem to believe that they have achieved enlightenment or various different levels of awakening. And one always gets the sense from these individuals that it's like they believe their work is done. And this is a product of a phenomenon known as mystic pride, one that all of us have fallen into at one point or another in our lives, and we might be ourselves in the same place. A place where, because we have made some progress, or because our life has improved in some way, or because we have been doing our so-called shadow work and we're not quite as insufferable as we used to be in our youth, we may develop a over-aggrandized sense of self. But what's very important to understand is that we are just a vessel. We are just a mortal vehicle. And although we might awaken powers, we might awaken abilities, obviously we learn and we know more than what we used to. At the end of the day, it is not the vessel that is being updated or upgraded. The vessel is a vehicle, but the self, the true self, who we really are, is the one who, for all intents and purposes, is on board the vessel. It is the self that is within. And it is always remarkable to find individuals who are still very much identified with, with their I, with their mortal self, the vessel, speaking about enlightenment and speaking about and some of them even in the New Age and whatnot speak of ascension, and that this humanity is on the cusp of ascending. It's absolutely necessary to meditate and comprehend just what we mean when we say that we're caught in duality and that we're caught in a binary paradigm. The binary paradigm will always apply to the vessel, to the human machine. The human machine is incapable of anything beyond that. You, the I, the self that you are, you are a part of nature, mechanical nature. Your body, your brain, your mind, your emotions, they are at the moment in the lunar astral plane, very much connected with your binary mechanical self. And if you observe your thoughts, and if you observe all of the arguments and all of the various things that you believe, you will recognize that. That vehicle, that vessel, that binary machine is all but incapable of trinary existence. Your physical body, in order for your physical body to transcend this physical realm, requires a level of advancement that it's simply not, it's not part of the binary dualistic mechanical capacity of the typical rational hominid, the typical vessel. Now, many people, because they can project into the astral plane, so-called lucid dreaming, and some may even have the ability to project their body into jinn state. They will believe, because they have these powers, that they are enlightened, that they are spiritually superior to others. And indeed, I'm no expert on the dark arts and all the capabilities that black magicians and demons possess. But it may be possible for them, through whatever dark magic they wield, it may be possible for them to take their physical body and put it into jinn state. I don't know. I'm not that much of a black magician to know that. I know that they can project themselves into the lunar astral plane. That goes without saying, because the lunar astral plane, the lunar fifth dimension, is klipoth. It's hell. So of course, demons of all kinds can navigate those dimensions. And as for the fourth dimension, there are jinn. There are what's the right word? Entities that are like, they're mechanical, they're tricksters. And there's astral larvae. These are phenomena that are associated with mechanical nature, and they can pervade in the fifth and fourth dimensions. So if there can be astral larvae, also known as incubi or succubi, and jinn and other mechanical, even malevolent spirits in those dimensions, then I don't put it past certainly awakened demons and powerful black magicians to be able to traverse and travel in the fifth and fourth dimension, and absolutely in the lower fifth dimension. Now, whether or not they can access the solar fifth, none of us, generally speaking, have absolute access to the solar fifth dimension. So, but these are all elements and aspects of the fact that we are, in our present state, we are not at the level that many of us may think we are, and that many people that I come across seem to believe that they are. It is not a hard border in the realms that define the human machine. It is not a hard border between that which is conscious and that which is mechanical, apart from, what we would say the causal body and the sixth dimension and up. But even there, we say that the consciousness is asleep. Well, what exactly does that mean? And how does that reflect upon the effects that mechanical nature can have, even in the sixth dimension, because the consciousness is in the sixth dimension? And certainly, we read in the book of Enoch and in other texts and traditions, we hear about fallen angels. We hear about fallen bodhisattva. Well, if angels and bodhisattva exist in the supernal worlds, and they're awake and enlightened beings in the sixth dimension and beyond, possibly, how exactly are they tempted? And how exactly do they commit errors to fall into sin, to fall into the lower dimensions? How are they affected? How are they reached? And we're talking about angels. We're talking about beings in the supernal worlds. If they can fall, then the notion that we here in the third dimension and our psychology in the lunar fifth dimension, where do we get off thinking that our work is done and that we're enlightened? No matter what sorts of powers that we've awakened, or what sorts of clairvoyance we have, or what sorts of intuition we possess. What matters more than anything is to be conscious and aware of what possesses us. What are we possessed by? Fear, lust, pride, envy, anger, gluttony, laziness? Or how about a little bit of all of the above? But certainly, if we go around believing that we're this, that, and the other thing, that we're a reincarnation of some master, or that we're enlightened already, or that our work is done, or we're on the verge of ascendance, and so on and so forth, clearly one of the phenomena that possess us is pride, mystic pride. And when individuals possessed by mystic pride speak and how they speak, because they treat awakening or enlightenment like an on-off switch. I used to be asleep, but now I'm awake. But you see, that's a dialectic. That's an expression of binary duality. an on-off switch. I used to be asleep, but now I'm awake. If you think that way, if that's the way you see yourself, you are still absolutely, totally, and completely trapped in binary duality. No matter what shred of intuition or awareness or wakefulness you may possess, that free consciousness you possess and that gives you moments of lucidity is nothing compared to the overwhelming, overbearing duality in which you're still trapped. And what's worse is, if you believe yourself awake and enlightened, and that, your work is done because you're awake now, you're enlightened, then you're absolutely enslaved by duality. Because enlightenment does not work that way. The universe is analog. Even mechanical nature is analog in its ultimate expression. That binary duality, that digital thinking, is unique to the mechanical mind. Because in nature, very few phenomena actually express themselves in absolute on or off. Everything is it's on a spectrum, it's on gradients. This is why we refer to analog as analog and digital as digital, because in computers, the ones and zeros and the mathematics of that and the language of computers is on and off. And the way chips work, computer chips, their little switches are either on or off. And so the instructions have to be given to have those the bits as on or off to allow electricity to flow or not to flow. So while there is a state of being asleep or awake, that binary reality, to be or not to be, very often in its expression in life, creates an overarching picture which is very analog. The black and whiteness ends up expressing in many, many shades of gray. And you can see that in your own life. For example, you might have quit a bad habit, or might be in the process of trying to quit a bad habit. And many people try to go cold turkey on many bad habits, and many fail to do so. Or they have relapses, or they cheat, or whatever they do, right? So you might say that in the attempt of breaking out of your bad habit, you went from being much darker in that habit to more in the light. But unless you're an alcoholic who really gives up drinking and doesn't so much as touch a drop of alcohol, which many alcoholics have to do, they have to take it to that extreme, because alcoholism is just the nature of the addiction. Is that many alcoholics, because you always are an alcoholic till the day you die, so that if you have so much as a drink, you can fall off the wagon and fall all the way back and regress and lose all the progress that you made. So in some cases, the expression really has to be black or white. But for others, not so much. but absolutely in the area of awakening, a free consciousness. This is not a question of you're 100% asleep and then you have some kind of miraculous experience, mystical experience, or you take ayahuasca or you eat some mushrooms or whatever, and then boom, all of a sudden you're awakened in your enlightenment and now you're 100% awake and enlightened. This is wrong thinking. But it's the belief in that reveals how clever and how powerful a hold duality has over us. That even in our claims to be awake or enlightened, we fail to grasp the very nature of what the trinary spectrum is and what enlightenment and being awake truly is. It doesn't mean that you are free of ego. It doesn't mean you are free from temptation. It doesn't mean that you don't occasionally fall asleep or that you can't be tempted, that you can't fall. And this whole question of awakening and enlightenment, what does that actually mean? If it's not an on-off switch, then what is it? Well, how do you know? Is it a percentage? Is it on a percentage basis? So the transition from binary to trinary is not a switch. And it's not something that you're going to point to and be able to say, oh, I used to be binary, but now I'm trinary. Like I used to be asleep, but now I'm awake. The process is long and arduous. And in order to conquer binary duality and the law of the pendulum, we must meet it on the field of battle on its own terms, which means there is naturally an oscillation that must take place. It is a different kind of binary oscillation. And we'll get into all of that in just a moment. But because we have been very neglecting of all of you, we notice that there's a whole bunch of comments that have been accumulating. So let's start going through some of your comments. So right off the bat, Kundalini King says, back to basics, talking shop. And he mentioned the lover, the warrior, the magician, the king. And he said, grandiosity, as the good Dr. Robert L. Moore liked to lecture on. Movement, movement and response. Machines do not sleep or rest. And he also said, you know what, we're going to try to do that with our left hand because our right shoulder has been killing us. It's a new moon, and well, we'll talk about the new moon in a while. And he also says, perhaps we are what happens when the soul dies. No, the soul doesn't die. Don't know what you mean by that. The soul never dies. Benjamin Raphael says, those fallen angels were not forgiven by God, even though they repented, as they were fully conscious when they committed their sins, unlike us humans, who are sometimes not fully conscious when we sin. Well, so this is this is an interesting point you make, Benjamin, because most people commit sins, as you're pointing out here, unconsciously. They don't, in other words, they are unaware. They're more or less even unaware of what they're doing when they're doing it. They're not present. They're not aware. They're completely identified and attached to the sin that they're committing, as though that desire was their own. But they don't give it a second thought. They don't pay attention to it. And then there are situations that you describe and suggest here the angels were in, which naturally they would be because they're enlightened beings, is that they were tempted, but they were fully conscious and aware of the temptation, and they gave into it anyway. So in other words, for us mortals, it's the difference between knowing something is wrong or you shouldn't do it. Your conscience says, this is probably not a good idea to have that, whatever. Nothing's coming to mind. To do that action, it's probably not a good idea. But then you do it anyway because the temptation is too great. Versus, let's say you're in an argument and you lose your temper and everything's happening so fast, you're not even aware of what's going on. It's only after the fact that you realize, oh my goodness, I lost my temper, and maybe you did something that you regretted. And we even have the expression, what possessed me to do that? Because in the moment you were possessed. And when you're possessed by some desire, by some craving or aversion or some ego, you're possessed by fear, possessed by anger, in that moment, you are really not conscious. Now, some of you have witnessed myself having a seizure. Now, I can tell you that when I'm having a seizure, I am not conscious. I am not there. But you see that I can behave, I can perform actions. So something is possessing me and performing those actions. And I'm not there. So a seizure is an extreme case, an extreme example of how unconscious we can be when we are under the influence of an ego, a demon. But even that, there's a gradient. So there's another example of one of these spectrums or gradients, where, in my case, the demon is always there, is always present. It's only a question of, has he built up enough capacity, strength to be able to take me over entirely? And the rest of the time, I have to be hyper vigilant because his ways are constantly trying to seep into my behavior. That's one of the interesting things about, anybody who's on the so-called autism spectrum, they even use that word spectrum, right? So there are habits and tendencies and psychological tics and quirks that go with anyone who has an expression of what they call the autism spectrum. So anything from ADHD to obsessive compulsive disorder, schizophrenia, even things like it's not coming to mind, where people have difficulty reading, uh, dyslexia, even dyslexia and Asperger's syndrome. These are all on the spectrum. But you will find, you speak to these individuals and they open up about being on the spectrum. And if they have self-awareness, that they will reveal that there are many, many different facets to being on the spectrum, not just the one thing that doctors will identify as, oh, well, you have dyslexia, and that's it. It's just there's a spectrum of factors. And the reason why that is because anybody on the spectrum is dealing with a more elaborate entity. And that it's that entity that interferes with them. And that entity will have a preferred methodology. So for example, dyslexia or obsessive compulsive disorder or chronic depression or chronic anxiety or ADHD or any number of these things that they have identified as being, quote, on the spectrum. But then they don't mention all the other things that go along with that. So it's not like you have epilepsy and that's it. No, you have epilepsy and then you can have a whole bunch of other tendencies that fall under the spectrum. So obsessive compulsive disorder and having a sort of addictive personality, being very bipolar-like or mercurial, and having chronic depression, which I have. It goes part and parcel with the epilepsy. So and anxiety, you can have panic attacks, you can have all sorts of things. It all depends upon the nature of that which possesses you. And so even if you're not on the spectrum, but you have a busy, crazy mind, and you occasionally suffer from anxiety, you occasionally suffer from depression, you occasionally find yourself, having obsessive compulsive behaviors or addictive behaviors, then you realize you might not be under the influence enough to be able to go to a doctor or a psychiatrist and be diagnosed officially on the spectrum. But everybody is on the spectrum because everything that causes us to have the busy, crazy mind and the anger, the fear, the anxiety, the depression, the lust, even the pride, the envy, and everything that goes along with that, all the behaviors and thoughts and beliefs and arguments and reactions that we have to people, all of that is caused by demonic possession. That's what egos are. So awakening, having some experiences on mushrooms or on ayahuasca, or having some mystical experiences because you do breathing exercises or what have you, or you have some experiences in meditation, that's all wonderful. But that doesn't mean you're now awake. And it doesn't mean that all of these elements, all of these entities that affect your thoughts and your behaviors, your actions and your reactions, well, they haven't gone anywhere. In other words, you're still trapped in the binary reality of all of those mechanical entities because egos are mechanical. They're algorithms. They want what they want and they're going to get it. And the fact that they're very good at getting it And all you have to do is know yourself, observe yourself to see how clever and subtle they can be. Like any opportunist, like any parasite in nature, they are relentless. Forget about persistent, they are relentless. It's now mosquito season where I live. And if you've ever been out in the woods at night on a humid summer's evening when it's hot and damp, and you're in the woods, the mosquitoes are they're like little tiny supervillains. Like nothing can stop them. It doesn't matter what you do, they keep coming at you. And they keep coming and coming. You can swat them away, bat them away, do whatever you do, short of actually putting a mosquito net over your head. And then in short order, it'll be completely covered in mosquitoes. And they're desperately trying to get to you. There's no dissuading them. There's no convincing them. There's no talking them out. And forget about all this talk about, oh, well, they're your friends. Our egos are our friends, or we need our egos, or we have to have compassion for our egos. Well, you go into the woods on a hot, humid summer's eve and see where your compassion for mosquitoes will get you. Because reasoning with parasites is not the best of strategies. Because your egos are no less mechanical and relentless as those mosquitoes or as any other parasite. They must feed. They must feed. And they will do whatever it takes in order for them to be able to accomplish their nature. And it's the nature of mosquitoes to bite and draw blood. That's what they do. And your compassion for them or trying to rationalize their existence in some way, or it doesn't change the fact that if we don't practice vigilance, we'll get eaten alive. Benjamin says a little bit of all of the above. And Kundalini King says grandiosity. Kundalini King also says conscious and aware, presence. I don't know about being awakened. Supin Kashper says, hello, Atlas. Great to see you. Nice to have you here, Supin Kashper. Benjamin says, but the Bible states that if we continue to sin deliberately after gaining knowledge of the truth, then there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but a fearful expectation of judgment. He continues in Hebrews chapter 10, verses 26 to 27. For if we go on sinning deliberately after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but a fearful expectation of judgment and a fury of fire that will consume the adversaries. And he continues, even Jesus the Christ prayed to the Father while on the cross, asking for forgiveness for the people because they do not know what they are doing. That's an interesting point about Jesus on the cross asking forgiveness for those who are crucifying him. It's a little bit taken out of context here because, of course, they knew what they were doing. It's just that they were erroneous in their beliefs about what they thought they knew. They knew they were crucifying a man. They knew that they had called for his crucifixion. They knew that they were mocking him and stoning him and hurling insults and basking in this man's suffering and death. They knew that. Now, it's possible that there were many in the crowds who were just caught up in it, like in mob mentality. So it's possible that there was a mob mentality at work, in which case, yeah, many of them wouldn't really have known what they were doing. But in the context of this passage from the Bible, when Jesus asks for their forgiveness because they know not what they do, it probably more has to do with the fact that they don't know that they're crucifying the Son of God, that they're crucifying. They don't know that the man that they are crucifying really is who he says he is. In fact, many, well, certainly the Hebrew authority, which called for his crucifixion, and the Roman authority, who acquiesced to the request, they thought they knew what they were doing as well. So in that context, they didn't really know what they were doing. You see? So there's a difference between the sin that you think you're committing and the sin that you're actually committing. But then, when you step back and you see it in the big picture of the Tao, and you realize the Black Lodge works for the White Lodge, and you realize that Christ couldn't have been Christ had he not performed the great and miraculous drama that unfolded in his life, the fact that he charged Judas with the task of betraying him, that it was all part of the plan. Well, are all those people really, well, they really don't know what they're doing now. So the duality of the rational mind fails us in our attempts to comprehend the depths, the multifaceted layers with regard to something seemingly as innocuous or as straightforward as Jesus praying on behalf of his tormentors, for they know not what they do. There are so many layers to this, and the mind can only handle one layer at a time. And then it asks the question, did they know what they were doing, or did they not know what they were doing? And on this layer, they knew what they were doing. But on another layer, they didn't know what they were doing. And on another layer, they really had no clue what was going on. But what is the answer, right? And the answer is that it's complicated. It's not black or white, is it, anymore? Not when you consider the comprehensive, holistic picture. Did Judas betray Jesus or didn't he? Well, he did. But did the fact that Jesus asked him to change the fact that he betrayed Jesus? These are what only consciousness can answer, because the mind gets stuck. Did he or didn't he? Is he or isn't he? Because that's how the mind works. It's binary, black or white, this or them, on or off, me or you, right or wrong. And so much of religion and religious belief falls into this binary duality. And this is why so many religions are, and other cultures and traditions and races and so on, are at loggerheads and at odds with each other, and breaks out in violence and war and all sorts of atrocities. Because it's always this animosity, the dividing and conquering of humanity by the dialectic itself. And that dialectic is baked into mechanical nature, despite the fact that it can express itself on an analog spectrum. Ultimately, it comes down to this binary duality. And Kundalini King says, I'm reading Stalking the Wild Pendulum by Itzhak Pendulum. His entire cosmology is the holography, the monad, the on and off, the oscillation. And Kundalini King says, I'm an alcoholic, a sober one. Once I was a counselor. Benjamin Ochoa says, sounds akin to obtaining immortality or salvation vis-a-vis acquiring sanctification. Kundalini King gives 3 fingers pointing up, and he says, nice observation, Ben. So, and then Kundalini thanks him for that. Joanne says, greetings, everyone. Great to be with you again. Enjoying the teaching today. Hello, Joanne. Nice to have you here. Alex says, you ever watch the movie Revolver? No, I can't say that I have. But nice to have you here, Alex. It's your... I'm seeing your name for the first time. So Kundalini King says, I found my glasses. Apologies for the confusing typos. He says, I have to go. Love you, brother. Alex says, if you're going to outwit the devil, it's terribly important that you don't give him any advance notice. That's a quote from Alan Watts. I'm not sure you're ever going to outwit the devil. That's an interesting quote, considering that wit is cleverness. Well, it depends. I suppose you can associate wit with humor, in which case... Anyway, we're not going to read too much into the quote from Alan Watts, but you don't outwit the devil so much as you observe and you resist. You see, our egos are way, way too clever and subtle. You see, that is their methodology, deception. Our higher self, the consciousness, doesn't deceive. It's honest. And some might say naive. Certainly the Black Lodge see it that way, and they exploit that, which is probably what Alan Watts is trying to get at here. But you don't fight fire with fire, because that's one of the clever tricks that the Black Lodge uses to turn us into Hasnamussen, or those that have a dual center of gravity. So you're awakening positively and negatively at the same time. You're awakening, but you're not eliminating your egos. In which case, your consciousness is awakening, but you're awakening in your egos right along with the awakening of consciousness. This means we have a dual center of gravity above and below, and that makes us a Hasnamussen. So I've done live streams dedicated wholly to that topic because it's a big one. But once you allow yourself to go down that path and you awaken negatively, and many people are awakening negatively because they're developing and seeking, they're doing all of this work to be present and awake and aware and developing their consciousness, but they're not working on elimination of the ego. So if the ego is this layer, this self, this false self, the vessel, right, the vehicle, the Iron Man suit, and the Iron Man suit has this AI called Jarvis, and it is an artificial intelligence, right? It's a rational mind. It's just a computer. And internally is the true hero. Inside is the true hero, the creator of the suit. But because that suit has an AI called Jarvis, it essentially has a mind of its own. And its programming dictates that it follows the will of its innermost master, which is Tony Stark. But if the consciousness awakens, and it's not the best of analogies because the ego has consciousness trapped within itself. So another way to think about it is that if you awaken your consciousness while you're wearing the Iron Man suit, and you have given full permissions to the AI Jarvis, then Jarvis, the AI, will become conscious and awake and aware by extension because it filters whatever is inside of it. So if the consciousness that's bottled up inside of the ego is asleep, that's one thing. But if the consciousness that's bottled up inside of the ego awakens, then that means the ego itself becomes that much more potent and capable. So in that moment, now the ego gains the power of free will. We call it ill will. And this is what a Hasnamusin deals with. And most of us are Hasnamusin to one degree or another. And those people running around saying that they're awake and they're enlightened, but their ego is very much intact, those people definitely are awakening as Hasnamusin. The problem is that as they become more awake and more aware, but their ego is still intact, their ego becomes that much more powerful because with knowledge comes power. And awareness, consciousness, brings with it a great deal of knowledge. But that knowledge now is accessible by the egos, whereas before, the egos, the demons, were just mechanical entities. They were just like computer programs, computer viruses. It's much the same as if, your computer is taken over by computer viruses. The computer viruses have access to whatever you are doing on that computer. So if you start doing more important things, you take your computer and you plug it into the nuclear launch system with the nuclear launch codes, those viruses gain access to those launch codes, if that's one way to think about it. So whatever it is you as the user are using your computer for, if you're doing more and more and more important activities using that system, if you don't eliminate the viruses and the malware has access to all that important data, all that important information that's passing through the computer. So they become that much more empowered and powerful. It's really difficult to find a good analogy for this. The ancients came up with the centaur, right? Half man, half goat, to describe the Hasnamusin. And the more powerful the man becomes, the more potent and powerful his animal side becomes, because you have this dual center of gravity. Okay. An example Alan gives is dealing with alcoholism and how could never say I'm done forever. So you always put off drinking until tomorrow. So forever becomes making it one day. And how you could never say I'm done forever. So you always put off drinking until tomorrow. So forever becomes making it one day. Right. So if you make it one day without drinking, it's every single day is like the first day of not drinking. And it's one day at a time. And you just do it one day at a time, and that's how you get to forever. Yeah. Benjamin Ochoa says, the past is left to the mercy of God and the future to its providence. The story of 3 monks who listened to the devil as to what they would have changed in the past, and the third got on his knees and called on God, and the devil shivered in fear and went away. He said, we never try to listen to the devil because you don't talk with your enemy. And he says it's very apropos at this time. You don't listen to the devil in terms of you don't do what he says, but you listen to the devil all the time because you have to. It's called self-observation. You have to hear temptation. You have to know how the adversary plays the game. You have to play the game. You can't walk away from the game and think that you're going to win, because the adversary is going to play you whether you're listening to or not. But I understand from the fable's point of view, it's saying you don't heed the words of the devil. You don't follow what he says. You don't do what he tells you to do. That's what they mean by you don't listen to him. But you do hear him out. You have to be aware of the temptations and how your egos are trying to get the best of you. This is what people who suffer from mystic pride don't realize, and they aren't aware that when they say, I am awake, they don't realize their ego is speaking for them and through them in that moment. Jennifer says, hello, Jennifer. Haven't said hello to you today. This is your first comment. She says, until we've enhanced our consciousness enough to get through the ceiling, so to speak, to where we then experience oneness and know unity, we are simply on the journey, but not awake. She says, just my perspective. We're not awake until we are conscious in the 6th dimension, until we have created our solar causal body. And that's a factor of metaphysical physiognomy. It's not an opinion, and it's not something that you can determine just by the experiences that you have. You can experience oneness. People have experienced oneness while on mushrooms. There are all shapes and forms and manners of experience, they don't necessarily tell us anything about our level of being. Because consciousness is a mathematically defined state according to our level of being. And our level of being has absolutely nothing to do with us. Right? The car does not change with the driver. Let me say that again. The car doesn't change with the driver. So as the driver improves his driving ability, the car stays the same. Now, the behavior of the car changes because the car is being driven better now. Why? Because the driver is better. So this is what I was saying earlier about being identified with awakening and enlightenment. It's like the car believing that it's enlightened, that it's a pro car now because its driver has turned pro. But the car is the same. It's the same car that he was driving before he turned pro. It's the same car that he's driving after he turned pro. The car hasn't changed. The behavior of the car changes because the driver is improved, but the car is the same and the car won't change. So it's just it's important to have this perspective because obviously when we have spiritual experiences, we're having them, or at least we're participating in them. And we like to believe a whole bunch of things about those experiences. And we like to attribute a whole lot of meaning to those experiences. But this is precisely the trap that we can get caught up in. Right? The mortal doesn't receive initiations in the supernal worlds. Jennifer also says, on a side note, more challenges and attacks will occur the closer we get to the ceiling. This is where folks give up. Well, if you are making true progress, that means your egos are feeling that they're losing their grip over you. If you are making genuine progress, your egos are weakening or their hold over you is weakening. That's genuine progress. The egos do not go quietly into the night. They do not give up without a fight. They fight back. On another note, as we progress on the Alm of Life, the analogous ultimate methodology, which we might as well, we've talked about this before, but there are at least, well, there were a couple of you who were new today, so just want to reiterate for everyone's benefit. On the analogous ultimate methodology is the spiral path that if to go up to increase in your level of being, there's only one way to do that. On the spiral path, you have to descend, you have to go down before you can go up. And if you start here, you can see that at the first levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, they have their corresponding, well, you know what? We actually we should call that level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So to get from level 1 to level 2, you have to descend to level -1. And then -2, -3, -4, etc. So what Jennifer is saying here, the closer we get to the ceiling, and she imagines some kind of a ceiling here, we presume. Let's see if we can. All right. As you approach this ceiling, whatever that may be, each progressive level up, you're going deeper and deeper into hell. Because if we call these the heavens, then down here are hells. This, of course, is Jacob's ladder from the Bible. And that's why the angels go up and down. They're marching up and down the ladder. Because it's the ladder into heaven and into hell. Because if you block out the two sides using your imagination here, if I put two rungs here, you see each level, they look like the rungs of a ladder. But they're not rungs of a ladder going up and down, like it's a spiral. Jennifer said, loved an analogy. She was making a comment on the vehicle and the driver. As Azazel says, it's almost like comparing a virus to a well-versed hacker. Yeah, so the hacker who has access to your computer will have access to everything that you do on the computer. Yeah, so the more important tasks that you're undertaking with the computer, the more knowledge that you're feeding to the hacker. So I guess the best analogy in this case would be if you're doing banking on your computer and you're trading stocks and you're accessing, savings accounts and all sorts of things on your computer. Well, the hacker is just mining all of that information, and then they can now clear out your bank accounts. They can sell all your stocks. They can wreak all kinds of havoc. Why? Because they have access to your computer. But it's your own activity that you're using on that infected machine that's giving them the wherewithal to clean you out. So yeah, so the malware and the hacker, it's the same analogy. It's just different. It's the same. The end result is the same. We're just using a different analogy. Benjamin says, is there a zero in the Alm of life? Or would it be the center or the void maybe? This is a good question, and it's complicated. There is a zero. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. We talked about nothing, but the way to think about it or understand it is twofold. First, there is a 0 point at not being, right? There is a zero here because this is the right, the center of the Tao, right? So the Tao emerges from nothing, and you can talk about, right, the heavens going up and the hells going down, and it has to expand from a 0 point. So the 0 point, for example, there are multiple 0 points on the tree of life. One of them is the fourth dimension. However, we are all progressing in our level of being back to the absolute, from whence this whole thing came. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago. So the absolute is the way the Buddhists understand it, but the way you can experience it, it's no self. It's absolute no self. You see, here on the Alm of Life, there's a self. There's a lower self and there's a higher self. But in the absolute, there is absolutely no self. All there is selflessness. Now, when you comprehend that, what you realize is that at every point in your development, progressing every level in the Alm of Life, it is selflessness that is the key to your progression. Because the three factors of the Alm of Life are, they are, I like to do them in a certain order. It's sacrifice, death, and birth. So sacrifice, obviously, it's selflessness. Death is selflessness, because in death, you're losing the self that you are, or rather are not, the illusory self, right? The illusion of self, the delusion of self. And what is born from the ashes is a higher self, the self. And this self is more selfless than the lower self. The lower self is more selfish. So in order to increase your return, to advance your return to the absolute, state of selflessness, you must go deeper and deeper into the hells of selfishness, and you eliminate what? You kill that which makes you selfish. And that which makes you selfish are the mechanical entities, the demons, that all they can be is selfish, because that's their nature. It's their nature to be selfish. That is the nature of the darkness. We've talked about this, all of this we talked about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Because the nature of the light is to shine, is to emanate, and the nature of the dark is to absorb and keep and hold on to. That's the conservation of energy. That's selfishness. There's really, when you think about it, the Tao has been called many things: masculine, feminine, positive, negative. But really, brass tacks, rubber meets the road, spiritual path, journey, alm of life, really what it comes down to is selfishness and selflessness. And this is why in Buddhism, for them, it's all about no self. Except the thing about Buddhists and Buddhism is, to me, having lived in Japan as well, and having been directly connected, there needs to be, as part of that selflessness, there needs to be that element of sacrifice. And now when we think about sacrifice, we think about, Jesus on the cross, or we think about, I don't know, sacrifice is a very strong word, right? But there's a much softer and more readily available version of sacrifice that, frankly, all of us can do. And it is an absolute mandate. And the word is service, right? To serve. Now, service, to serve others. The Japanese have this nailed down. To them, it's not even, obviously, it's like it's baked into their culture, it's baked into their spirituality, and obviously it relates to Buddhism, but they've severed the ties between this word and its Buddhist origins. And frankly, it might even have Shinto origins as well. So I'm going to use blue because it's the word is the spelling of it. I think it's omotenashi. I can never remember the spelling of it. It's omo or oma or ome. Omotenashi. I think this is how you spell it. And this omotenashi forgive me, this is really going to bother me. So I have to I've got to look it up. And it's Why are we? No. Info. Or about. Omotenashi. I was right the first time. I should know never to second guess my intuition. So it's omotenashi. Okay. So omotenashi, it's service, but it's like it's more than just service with a smile. It's a kind of reverent service. So it's like you're serving the other person's soul. You're elevating them. You're elevating the other person through your service. Does that make any sense? And now, if you feel into that, how can you elevate someone through your service without elevating yourself in the process? And the way to understand that is to visualize climbing a mountain with someone. Now, you know, if you've ever gone mountain climbing, yes, you can give someone a boost, like up over a wall or up, by letting them, put their foot in your hand and you give them a boost. But the reality is, it's far more practical when you're mountain climbing that you climb ahead and you reach down and you grab them by the hand and you pull them up. It's easier to pull than it is to push. It's very, very, very hard. It's impossible, in fact, as a mountain climber. You will never see mountain climbers try to do this, where the person below is trying to help the person above them. It's always the reverse. So omotenashi is a recognition of that fact. So that in order to help someone get to a higher level, we have to first make super efforts to be at that higher level so we can pull them up, so we can raise them up. So this is where the Japanese ideal of Bushido, or life in every breath, the way of the warrior, life in every breath, comes into play. Because if you can become a master of what you do, then your omotenashi, through that mastery, will be able to bring people up to a higher level. So tea ceremony, for instance, becomes a meditation. It becomes a ritual, it becomes a rite, it becomes a service, like a mass, a prayer, where the people being served are the ones being worshipped. And the server, the one who's performing the tea ceremony, performs it in that way, so as to, with a kind of reverence and solemnity and to perfection, so that those experiencing it may experience perfection through their service, through the tea service. And in involving them in that perfect tea service, they have the opportunity to be elevated and experience perfection, and that the experience of perfection awakens something within us. That within us which longs to experience perfection, that longs to experience God's perfection, that perfect expression of perfection in nature, in what anybody does. And when you are touched by the hand of God through an act of perfection, an act of perfect service, you are moved by that. It touches you. You feel it, and it awakens in you the spark, the longing to want to pay that forward. And you can experience this when you go to Japan. This omotenashi, where it's a cultural aspect where people are just so enthusiastic and intense in their acts of service and in what they do. They do things, they seek to do things to perfection. They seek perfection all the time in anything they do. And when you are touched by somebody's service, who's approaching their service in that way, it raises you up. You cannot experience that type of selflessness, that type of service, that sacrifice, that devotion, that dedication, and not be moved by it, unless you're completely callous and cynical and asleep, in which case it'll be lost on you. And believe me, while I was there were plenty of foreigners who didn't get it. And they thought it was actually stupid and naive and foolish. And they like to poke fun and make fun of the Japanese. They're so this and so that. Or these, like I ran into quite a number of just flat out ignorant foreigners in Japan that just didn't get it. They just didn't understand. They did not appreciate. And herein lies a special magical relationship between sacrifice and service to others and the relationship between omotenashi and what I was saying about raising people up. Because the operative word here, we just said it a moment ago, is to appreciate. Whoops. To appreciate means to increase in value. And I've talked about this before, where your sacrifice, your service to others, you are making an investment of your time, of your energy, of your intensity, of your caring, of your concentration, your focus. You are making an investment. And when that investment and that service is received with gratitude, when your service and sacrifice for others is appreciated, then your investment has gone up in value. Your investment has appreciated. And this is one way, this is actually a critical aspect of the trinary modality as opposed to a binary duality, because in binary duality, it's always a sum zero game, and it's always about an equal exchange. So mechanical nature is all about equal exchanges and everything balancing out to zero, because that's that balance in the universe. But the trinary modality, it's about an acts of creation, and there's really only one act in mechanical nature, where the trinary modality exists. And it exists obviously in a mechanical way, but that that example is sex, because it's an act of creation. You have let's see, feminine and masculine, and union. But this creates a new being, a new creature, offspring. Now the thing about a spring is that it's a spring, right? Spring is renewal, it's life, it's birth, this is of course birth. This will be balanced out in the end by mechanical nature through death. But the third aspect, creation here, this is of course mechanical nature. It's not exactly creation, it's procreation. This is a trinary phenomenon in its, very primitive form. But the point is, you have an expression, you have a reception, and you have an appreciation. This third point of union is higher and greater than the sum of its parts. That is appreciation. To appreciate. When these two forces of expression and reception come together, this is the third factor of appreciation. So it's very similar in dynamic to the relationship between sacrifice, omotenashi, and how the appreciation of that, because a sacrifice is an expression. It's an expression of love, service, to serve others. It's an expression of love. It's a selfless act. And if that is received with gratitude and then it's appreciated, then the union of that expression and reception is appreciation. It's a beautiful thing, and everybody is greater for it. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to recognize that even in the act of animal sexuality, the mother and father, in the creation of a child, in the birth of a child, their lives are forever changed. They are now a family. They're no longer just a couple. Dual income, no kids, right? A newlywed couple completely changes once they have their first child. Now they're a family, and the dynamic is completely different. The entire collective has kicked up a notch. It's gone up in value, it's gone up in responsibility. It's right, it's a unit. It's a trinary unit now. Whereas before, it was just a binary duality. Yes, they were a couple, two as one, sure. And if they were working with White Tantra, then they were really working already in trinary, because they were working three in one with one another. But that's this element of what we're describing here. You see how important and how magical this relationship is, this trinary relationship. And in all that we do, in all that we seek, this is the relationship. So can we give anyway, there's a couple of comments, and we'll come back to this in just a moment. Let me get a couple of comments out of the way. About the zero. Benjamin asks, I ask because I recently became a mail carrier and I mix up addresses every time I see ones and zeros within the address. I thought to myself, maybe this is no coincidence and I'm onto something. And I think it's because it's the very fabric of the AI virtual reality that messes with us, like recognizing the alm of life or the glass ceiling blocking us from metamind. And he says, mind blown, thanks. I think he was referring to earlier when we showed this something or other. So let's go back to, because we're talking about how to upgrade yourself from binary to trinary. So not all of us are going to be married and having children anytime soon. Some of us will never be having children. And many people have children and start families who aren't on the path of awakening or self-realization. So there must be another layer to this. There must be an analog, an analogous expression of this taking place in our life. And there is. And that expression is in consciousness itself. Now, this should come as no surprise because consciousness is obviously all important to the spiritual advancement, the spiritual path. But how does it functionally play out? Well, we know when we think about consciousness, many of us recognize that there's a perception element to it. So we have to be able to perceive. And this is what most people think about when they think about being awake or aware. So it's being perceptive, but not just with our eyes, with our physical senses, but actually with consciously being present and awake and aware. And the expression is to pay attention. So if we're going to use some A words here, we can add another one here. Attention or attentive, but we're going to say pay attention. Now, what does that mean, pay attention? This is a form of service, a form of sacrifice. Like omatanashi, you give of yourself. There's a selflessness when you pay attention, because you're focusing on what? You're focusing on another expression. Now, that expression is its own kind of service and sacrifice. And when it is received, when it is perceived in an active way, because it's paid attention to, a third state is born. We're going to add the word reception here. There can be no experience outside of this triangulation, outside of this tri-unity. Experience cannot exist without these three factors. This is every single moment of every single day of your life. Right? 3 in 1. This, by the way, is Tantra. This is the real meaning of Tantra. Expressions are, of course, masculine, and perceptions, receptions, are feminine. And experience is the union of feminine and masculine. And it's all contained within the field of consciousness. Consciousness has its positive and its negative. It's masculine, it's feminine. It's affirming and negating aspects. So, but this is important. This is an investment. The expression is an investment in the person doing the expressing. So, for example, the artist or the musician, but the operative word here is art. Our Father who art in heaven. So we want to be as above, so below. We create our art in our word. We express ourselves through our thoughts, our words, our actions, so that we may art in the world as we are in heaven, as we art in heaven. That's what expression is. Artistic expression, but we make life into a work of art. So art is more than just art as we think about it, painting and music and so on and so forth. So obviously there's a selflessness, there's a sacrifice, there's a service aspect of that. But the second part, which we spoke of at the very beginning of this section is to pay attention. There's this investment that goes the other way. And it's investing in our perception, it's investing in our reception, in our wakefulness, in our awareness, that we have the potential to appreciate our experience. So our experience becomes greater than the sum of its parts. And in the one who is doing the service and sacrifice this way, they likewise, the artist likewise, can appreciate that experience because it's a shared experience. Like the server that we were talking about earlier, it's a shared experience. Or like the mother and father who give birth to a child, it's obviously a shared experience, and the thing that is shared is the family. But this is a shared experience every moment of every day. There is nothing that you can experience that doesn't involve this triunity. The question is, do you appreciate that experience? Are you paying attention? And if you are doing things, are you expressing? Are you paying attention to what you are doing? Or more importantly, to being. To being done. You're paying attention to what you are doing and recognizing, am I the one doing it? Or am I being done? Because if I am being done, then my art, then I am not the artist. My art is flowing through me, not coming from me. And it's coming from the real artist who art in heaven, our Father, who art in heaven. If I'm paying attention to how I'm being done, then the expression itself is its own triunity. Between the artist, the true artist in heaven, and the vehicle, the vessel on earth, and the art that is created, the expression. So let's see if I can fix this somehow because it's messy. Why don't we just, you know what? I think it's probably easier if I just do this. This is how you know that none of this is planned and all of this is spontaneous, because as this is evolving, something is now coming up that necessitates a whole different approach to drawing this. Okay, so we're going to zoom out a bit here and get, okay. Yeah, so I really want to keep the as above, so below aspect going. You know what the problem is? I need to go all of this and drag all of this down here. Okay. And we're going to just erase this for now. So we have who art in heaven, and we have our vessel. You know what? Let's use the word messenger. So the artist on earth. And then this is art, which of course is both masculine and feminine. Because the artist on earth is feminine to be able to receive the expression from his inner artist. We call this inspiration, imagination. That's received by the artist on earth. So that's he has to be paying attention and awake and aware. And then he uses his ability or her ability, their ability, to create the expression in art, which is a union of that inspiration and imagination and that feminine, the skills and experience that they also have to put into what ends up being an expression, which is both masculine and feminine, which is then received and then create a shared experience. So this chain, it's always a chain of three. And if you think about it, the artist who takes their inspiration and turns it into art, they are appreciating what they received from above. And their art that they create, if they feel a sense of fulfillment, then their inner artist, God, right? He also appreciates this shared experience, this shared creation, the creative act of our innermost essence, the artist, the being that has his messenger, his vehicle, his vessel, his on earth to do that shared experience of that expression. Something tells me that we can keep going with this and that there is actually connections here. Because this shared experience of this perception of the artwork, of the expression, creates a new experience, which then leads on to other things. And it's this cascading effect, or a chain reaction. But of course, this is all happening in consciousness. We should probably write that word here as well. So this is conscious. This is where reality exists. This is where experience and appreciation of experience and knowledge and wisdom exists. This is all taking place in the 6th dimension. This is why Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, you have to think in terms of 3, 6, and 9. Not, where's the duality anywhere here? This is what experience actually looks like. This is what experience of reality, the process, actually is. It's a trinary process. Despite the fact that there is a duality involved, here we have an inner artist, we have the being, and we have its vessel. Here we have the artist, the expression of art, and the person perceiving it. But that duality, those two, that separation between those two things, nothing can happen. It's only when they come together, when someone is paying attention and the other one is making an investment of selflessness and service, an act of sacrifice to share, right? An act of sharing. It's how you arrive at a shared experience. And something tells me that between here and here, we can do another connecting line, and that we can take this in more directions. And that what we will end up with is like a matrix of triangles, of trinary relationships like this. And that it's a like a geodesic dome, right? Everything, all these interconnecting triads of experience where one flows into another, into another, into another, but they're all trinary relationships, and they're either appreciating or depreciating, because there are such things as depreciating relationships where the shared experience is not appreciated, but it's reviled, it's unappreciated. And unappreciated means depreciated. It goes down in value, or it has no value, or its value becomes negative. But that's perhaps getting a little too abstract. A way to think about this or understand this concept of appreciating in the moment, moment by moment, appreciating experience. We've talked before about something called the transformation of impressions. where you have an experience, but you appreciate that experience, you gain something from that experience. And that, I think, is what ultimately we're going to get at here when we talked about taking this to the next level. Because you have this inner essence who's ultimately the one who has to experience that shared experience and gain something from it that's new. And that new thing that we get from that experience is gnosis. And that is an appreciation of the experience. And that is something that is gained by the essence. So the inner artist has to be allowed to perceive, to receive. And for that, we have to be present and transform. And so the transformation of expression, it's not the messenger here on earth who needs to process and understand the experience. It's our higher self. And what we seek is self-evident experiential knowledge. That's gnosis, that we extract, that we appreciate from the experiences that we have. But that is generated by the perception, the reception, and the comprehension by our essence, by the being. Now I'll make that smaller here. Because gnosis, self-evident experiential knowledge, belongs to the higher self. It exists in consciousness. And remember, all of this is happening in consciousness. So just as I intuited, the web, the interconnection of all of these triangles are what form the fabric of the conscious experience, which weaves the web of knowledge and understanding of self-evident experiential knowledge, of gnosis. It is predicated and absolutely reliant on the law of three, the creative law of the universe. And as I said, this is Tantra. And if you look on the physical level, that same web of life, the interconnectivity of all things, the interconnectedness of all phenomena, this is what's taking place in the sixth dimension, in the supernal worlds, in the field of consciousness. So to be a trinary human being is to be playing in this field and to be operating in this way. And you'll notice how many times you see the word appreciate. This is where the New Agers will get their positivity, the cult of positivity. That's where the cult of positivity comes from. But appreciation, right? Well, the attitude of gratitude, yeah, okay. But appreciation means more than just being grateful. It is an increase in value. It is a transformation of the fundamental nature of the investment. I mean, it's very nice and it's a trite and catchy thing to say, oh, have an attitude of gratitude. Okay. But here you begin to see how we're talking about a return on investment. We're talking about an appreciating asset. And that asset is our attention, our awareness, our energy, our focus, our concentration, our inspiration, our imagination, that which we invest, or that which is invested through us. Couple quick comments here. Alex says, talking again about the Revolver movie. Highly recommend to all. It has Jason Statham. Sort of starts out like any Jason movie, but is absolutely about ego death. And he says, I did love your video about connecting how James Bond is always him fighting himself. Yeah, all films and stories about the hero who has a nemesis, it's always that. It's always that. Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty as well. I'm going to give this Revolver movie a look-see tonight, in fact. I think I'll do that because you're speaking quite highly of it, Alex. Benjamin says he will also take a look. Okay. So where are we at? We've gotten the law of three, birth, death, and sacrifice. We've got the alm of life. Okay. This, let's hone in and focus on this part here. I don't know if you can make out the highlight. So let's forget about the highlight. And because we said we need to perceive, we need to see. And it's in the perception and reception that we end up with an appreciation. So if we know there's something here that's missing, and we're going to call that, this is what we seek, right? Some of you who are new, that's why we're spelling this all out. But it's traditionally self-knowledge, but self-evident experiential knowledge. This is not book learning. This is directly perceived conscious knowledge, right? It's just like what we were looking at earlier when we looked at an expression by an artist and a perception of that, and then the appreciated shared experience, and then extracting from that shared experience gnosis. Okay. But we're going to look at it from the perspective of an experience. We're going to start with experience. An experience is expressed. And we have that experience, right? We have an experience. We receive it. We perceive it. This experience is an expression of love by our Divine Mother. Who arranges everything that we need in life, including all of our tests, trials, and ordeals. Which is ironic because, right, she's feminine, right? But of course, we have to take all of this. We have to remember the Tao. We have to remember that the opposites are in each other, and that the Divine Mother is not strictly feminine, right? We all have masculine and feminine inside of us. It's all this eternal dance between positive and negative and neutral. So affirmation, negation, and reconciliation. So we have an expression which is effectively positive in nature. It's an expression. We receive that, which is a reception, which is the feminine aspect. And the union of this, if we're conscious and aware, we have to transform the experience to extract. So it's an extraction. It's a digestion. Because when you have something, you take it in, you must digest it, you must break it down in order to get that which is valuable, to extract the vitamins, the nutrients, the minerals, the energy out of the food you eat. Well, impressions are like food. So if we try to digest our experience with the mind, which is, remember, binary duality, right? If we try to digest with the rational mind, what ends up happening? What ends up happening is we stay down here in this ping pong match, right? We call it an argument, right? We call it a fight. It's a conflict. Why? Because we have positive and negative. We have masculine and feminine. We have affirmation and negation. But the third part, this is the union. This is reconciliation. And this can only happen in consciousness. Because the rational mind is stuck in ones and zeros. This is the binary duality. We must turn the binary into the trinary. We must update it. We must upscale it. We must upgrade it. And this is moment by moment, every impression, every expression, every experience that we have. And one of the ways we do that is by remembering our Divine Mother. Because when we remember our Divine Mother, we remember it's a gift. It's a precious gift. It's manna from heaven. It's the bread of life. It's the breadcrumb trail. We've used all of these terms before. Give us this day our daily bread. That's food. That's impressions. That's the sustenance that we receive from our Divine Mother, the experience that we need to receive. But if we don't digest and extract from that experience that which we need to know, and which we need to know, you see, you get this, you get where we're going here? We call this the transformation of impressions. Because if we attempt to digest and extract with the mechanical, rational mind or emotions, then yeah, we end up arguing, bickering back and forth, stuck in binary duality and binary reality. We get stuck on the pendulum. He said, she said, pointing fingers, scapegoating. You said this. No, I didn't say that. You said that. No, you're just projecting and blah, 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 blah. And we're just stuck, right? We have to be conscious and present and aware. And we have to appreciate the gifts of our Divine Mother, the experiences that she is giving us. To appreciate, we must digest and extract what is valuable, which is what we seek, the self-evident experiential knowledge, what we need to know, which is precisely why our Divine Mother gave us that experience in the first place. This is an act of creation which is a little different from the creation of an experience, because we talked about that, you know, how we actually create the experience is another triangulation, right? We talked about down here, right? We said that we're focusing up here now. That's what this is. Focused in more detail. So again, to be a triune human being, to work with more faculties, a faculty greater than our binary duality. If you want to be a triune human being, you cannot rely on your binary rational mind. Now, you might be saying, but hey, well, listen, man, in the moment, I can't do this in the moment. And say, sure, okay, I get it. If you can't do this in the moment, then what do? Well, you can still pay attention and focus and concentrate, and especially when the experience is severe, where there is an argument, you do lose your temper, or it's significant. You know that, you know, you got caught up in some egos. Some egos were triggered, triggered egos. And the egos did the digesting, right? And then they kicked back, right? They spat back, they slapped back. If you're paying attention to that and you saw how all of this created a downward spiral, right? And as everything devolved, Alex mentioned this movie Revolver with Jason Statham, Now, it's interesting because in the Alm of Life, you have the upward spiral of evolution and you have the downward spiral of devolution. And there are two spirals in both of these because you have expansion. Just as this is a quick aside on the Alm of Life, you have expansion and you have synthesis. Synthesis. And on the downward spiral, you have explosion and implosion. Speaking of Jason Statham. Okay? So what happens is the egos, if they digest the experience, you end up with an explosion as their egos are triggered. So, for example, an explosion of anger, right? And then that is immediately followed by retaliation, etc. And then what happens? The whole thing devolves and you have an implosion. So an explosion of anger can lead to an implosion of a relationship. An explosion of envy can lead to an implosion of a friendship. An explosion of laziness can lead to the implosion of a business or business relationship, right? So there's two orientations to the downward spiral. But we're here to learn through the trinary methodology. And by the way, this is the only thing that can happen out of the binary relationship. Why? Because in the binary duality, in the law of the pendulum, you have the law of entropy, which rules mechanical nature. And this back and forth, tit for tat, if you draw a pendulum here, a pendulum swinging back and forth between extremes, between opposites, entropy rules that. You just watch a pendulum. The pendulum can only degrade. It can only devolve. You can only end up in the downward spiral. Whether it's explosion or implosion, it doesn't matter. But we are here to appreciate. We are here to learn the trinary methodology of expansion and synthesis. This is appreciation. This is evolution. This is the upward spirals. And to do that, to appreciate, we receive in consciousness, we perceive in consciousness. But if you can't do that in the moment, you have to remember all of this. These moments, these fights, these arguments, when anger and when explosion and implosion, and then later on in the evening, you go into meditation and you do a retrospection meditation on your day, and you pick an event that happened during the day where you were caught in the binary duality, and you meditate on that event and you replay the event in your meditation using your visualization. You don't indulge the same feelings. This is not you're not method acting. You're not here to relive the event with all of its pain and suffering and everything else. You're here to observe it as objectively as you can in your consciousness, free of the egos that were triggered. But you want to remember and perceive how they made you feel and how they made you act, and comprehend how those egos were causing you and others suffering, how they were creating the downward spiral. And you do that in your consciousness in meditation so that you can allow your consciousness to digest the events of the day and extract from it what you need to know, why your divine mother put you in that circumstance to begin with and gave you those impressions to begin with. So this is where self-observation and self-remembering and meditation in retrospection comes into play. And moment by moment, the transformation of impressions throughout your day. So what people call mindfulness. Do you see how much more there is to mindfulness than just what Eckhart Tolle says? Being present and aware and connecting to that beautiful place of nothingness and being present and aware. Yeah, okay, thanks. Now what am I doing with that? Who's digesting it? How am I extracting? How am I appreciating? How am I evolving? How is my consciousness expanding? How am I synthesizing new self-evident experiential knowledge, new self-knowledge, that which we need to know, that which is why my divine mother gave me that whole experience in the first place. You see how the new age, just being there and being present, just being mindful. Oh, just be mindful, be mindful, be mindful. Well, that's great. That's like going to the buffet and saying, oh, just eat, just eat, just eat, just eat, just eat. And nobody telling you to digest. Because none of this can happen mechanically. None of this happens automatically. Your digestive system in your body works automatically because it's a machine. But this is happening in consciousness. This is your consciousness we're talking about. And the whole point about consciousness is that it's not mechanical. It doesn't happen automatically. You have to consciously digest and extract. But it's not you who does it. It's your being. It's your higher self who does it. But you have to make yourself, you have to avail yourself to the process of the Alm of Life. Because the reality is the aspect of you that does this work is your higher self. It's not you, the mortal, who does it. And so the more you do it, the more you are being. That's why working with consciousness and working as a triune human being, you cease to be just this mortal vessel, because you're actively living your life from that triune perspective, hum, manas, and being. The consciousness is not yours. The consciousness does not belong to the vessel. The consciousness belongs to the being, your true self. So when people say you have to be mindful, you have to be mindful, you have to be mindful, guess what? If it's only you who's being mindful, you're still stuck in binary duality, because you still think that you are you, instead of looking in the mirror and seeing this meat sack that you put on for this lifetime as an Iron Man suit, and this personality that you have up here and the rational mind that you have up here as the Jarvis AI that runs the Iron Man suit but obeys the true superhero inside. But when you practice the Alm of Life, and when you practice trinary, human 3.0, when you're functioning on the human 3.0 operating system of being a trinary human being, right? Trinary, 3 in 1, a triune human being, a true human being. Now you are living from the perspective of your being, of your higher self. And the more you do this, and the more you comprehend, because comprehension is extraction of knowledge, and it's extraction of self-knowledge. the more you comprehend, the more knowledge you extract about yourself, specifically your egos, that which get triggered and that which cause the explosion and implosion in your life, that causes your energy, your vital energy, to flow down and out, because that's these downward spirals, because that's one thing you know about anger and about implosion. You're losing energy in that process. It's an entropic process, right? The energy goes down and out. The more you can comprehend the causes of your suffering, that causes your energy and everything to flow down and out, the more your Divine Mother can eliminate those elements inside of you. And that's she, through this process of gaining self-evident experiential knowledge and sacrificing and serving your higher self, paying attention, appreciating, she can facilitate your psychological death, the death of your egos. She can eliminate those egos that you comprehend. Why? Because you've extracted the knowledge that you needed to know, that those egos needed to teach you. You've learned your lesson. Once you've learned your lesson, the egos can be eliminated. You don't need to relearn that lesson anymore. This is why your Divine Mother gave you those experiences in the first place. Those impressions. Remember, it was food. She was giving you that food so you could extract the nutrition, extract the lessons, extract the knowledge from that food. But once you do that, if you do that, then guess what? Your Divine Mother can say, okay, we can poop out the rest. You don't need it anymore. You've learned your lesson. You don't need to go through that again. Or if you go through it again, you're going to be doing it at an entirely different level. Oh, it's interesting, hey, how the scale of things work, right? Because when we zoom in, this is our alm of life, right? Remember we were talking about levels? You have to go down into hell. Why? Like the hero, you descend into the dungeon, into hell, right? In the dungeon or the labyrinth in hell. And what do? You have to confront. You have to face your demon. But if you do that, and if you face and you learn, you conquer your demons, either in the moment or in meditation, you digest and extract consciously what you need to know, your Divine Mother can eliminate them. And then you return as the conquering hero, and you can then go to the next level of the dungeon. And the deeper you go in the dungeon levels, the higher the level of the demons that you face. Right? So dungeon levels go down, demon power goes up. And that's how this works in every RPG, including on the computer. And all video games where you got to, you increase in levels in the video game, and the difficulty level increases, right? Makes sense. And that's how you advance levels. But who's advancing is your being, the one who's actually facing and digesting and extracting the value. From an RPG role-playing game perspective, what you're getting from the demons, what you're recovering is the treasure that was being hoarded by those demons. And from the traditional fairy tale perspective, you are often freeing the maiden, who, as you know, in fairy tales like Sleeping Beauty and Snow White, she's very often put to sleep because Psyche, when we say maiden, we better put it in air quotes so people understand. We're not talking about women here, hapless, hapless, hopeless, weak women, right, who need to be saved by the strong man. No. It has nothing to do with that. Psyche is feminine. Right? The consciousness. The maiden that has been captured and is being held prisoner, right? And has a spell put on it, so that she falls asleep. This is all allegories for the psyche. In other words, the consciousness. The demons, your egos, have consciousness bottled up inside of them. So when you comprehend them and your divine mother can eliminate them, it liberates that consciousness. That's the treasure. And that's the maiden who then is liberated. And what does she do? She marries the hero. And he returns the conquering hero, right? Because he conquered Medusa, or he conquered the Minotaur. He freed Snow White. He freed Sleeping Beauty. Like when you play video games, when you play Diablo and you go down deeper and deeper and deeper into the dungeons, you get more and more treasure, right? Better weapons, more gold. The deeper you go, the monsters get harder, the bosses get bigger, the challenge gets greater, but also what you recover is greater, and your level as a character increases. This is all an allegory for the Alm of Life. This is all an allegory for the spiritual path. And you will see that in the big picture of the Alm of Life, there is a trinary process underway. There's a trinary process. What you do individually in the moment to transform an impression and extract self-evident experiential knowledge, what we seek from the moment, the experiences, the impressions that are food that your divine mother gave to you, in the process of digesting that and extracting that, that's exactly what you're doing here in the big picture. Because you're descending into the dungeons to face your demons. And in the dance, in the sparring, in the battle that ensues with the demon, you defeat ignorance. You defeat fear. You recover the treasure. You liberate the maiden. You vanquish, right, with the help of your divine mother, because the weapons that every hero receives in classical mythology, he always receives from his divine mother, from the goddess. So Perseus receives his sword and shield from Athena. And he descends into the labyrinth to face Medusa. As you know, the demon with the many serpents on her head, that if you look directly at her, you will turn to stone. But Perseus is able to perceive her in the polished mirror of his shield. And in that way, he doesn't look directly into the demon's eyes. So these are all complex allegories around what it takes to face. And that's, again, related to seeing your demon not directly with your rational perception, your mechanical faculties, because if you do that, you'll be turned to stone, right? You'll be paralyzed. You'll be petrified. Why? Because we talked about it over here, is that the rational mind is not capable of that form of digestion that we need. So we end up stuck on the pendulum of binary duality. And that's like being paralyzed. That's being petrified. We end up in the downward spirals of explosion and implosion and entropy and we're frozen. We can't we can't appreciate. We can only depreciate. But if we look through the weapons, the shield that was given to us by our Divine Mother, through her perception and consciousness is feminine, and we remember our Divine Mother, that's why self-remembering is so important when it comes to self-observation. That's why in Gnosis we always say self-observation and self-remembering. We don't just say mindfulness. Remember yourself, remember your Divine Mother, because then you will perceive and you will remember what to perceive it through your higher faculty of consciousness, which is feminine, the divine soul. So you gaze into the shield and you see the reflection of your adversary reflected on clear, polished consciousness, free of the fear and the anxiety and the power of Medusa and her many egos on her head, her many demons, her many serpents on her head to petrify us, to turn us to stone. Because Alex, Perseus, is facing himself, right? Medusa is an allegory for our own demons, right? So again, it's any hero who ever faces any adversary is facing himself, is facing a mirror of himself. So yeah, it's the hero's journey, transformation of impressions, the extraction of self-evident experiential knowledge. This is another trinary act. Now, what's interesting is we've done this before. We've shown two different kinds of, because we talk about revolution, right? Because the alm of life is a spiral, and we're talking about revolutions. We have to go through this cycle many times, obviously. And many of us have faced many trials over and over and over and over again. Well, it's interesting that there are two kinds of videos that are very wonderful to watch. That relate to what we're talking about here. And let's see if we can just we want to do this without getting into problems. Okay, we're going to mute it, and hopefully we'll get to the... Okay, so we'll start with this one. Yeah, okay. So as you can see, this is right? This is how you form pottery. This is creation, where it's like an additive process. You're adding clay to the wheel, and then you're forming and shaping, and you're adding water and using the water to form and shape. And everybody should be familiar with this. And you can see this many revolutions. You can see there's forming and shaping. So there's this act of creation where this is not really an additive act, but let's say for just argument's sake that because they're adding water and the applying the pressure and everything else, you're forming and shaping. So it's an additive process. So that's like the first example of the artist and then creating the experience. This is like creating the experience, right? So this is like the first level or first aspect. But then to extract the knowledge from that experience, we have another kind of turning. And this is where you put a on a lathe. Yeah, okay. This is a subtractive process, right? This is now you're using the same process of turning. But with every revolution, you're chipping away a little by little by little by little by little. Both of these need to be taking place simultaneously in our experience and on the path of a triune human being. Because in this process, you have an extraction, an explosion happening of what's superfluous. And in that explosion, you have a synthesis of what's valuable, what's needed, what you want to extract. And in the pottery, you have a different kind of process in the act of creation of the experience. So it's like, if you can imagine somebody putting wood, putting a clay onto a wheel and turning it until you have this big chunk of wood, and then taking that wood and putting it on a lathe and carving it out until you get what you need. It's that type of relationship. And you can see how birth and death are involved in both. Service and sacrifice, the paying attention, for instance, are involved in both. And that creation, they are both acts of creation. Even as it's an act of destruction, it's an act of death. But what's born out of what dies, so this is the alchemical transmutation process, where something ceases to be what it was and is transformed into something else, something remarkable. And it's all predicated upon the revolution. And what's revolution? What's a revolution? To tear down the old and replace it with the new. And presumably better, more righteous, more selfless, more altruistic. Revolutions happen against corruption, against evil, against darkness. The other thing that is very interesting about both pottery or the wood turning is that it's a trinary process. It's a triunity. In wood turning, you have the axle, but it's held together by 2 points on the lathe. And the revolution of the lathe, and then you have the, I guess, the chisels, the knives, I don't know what you call them. But it's those 3 points. And when you're doing pottery, you have the wheel and one revolutionary axle, one axis of revolution, but then you have the 2 hands. You can't do pottery with one hand. You need 2 hands forming it from both sides. You need the both axes and from the top, but you need both hands. It's a trinary process. Like, there is no binary duality in life. It really only exists conceptually in the infernal worlds, thanks to ego, thanks to our mechanical nature. Practically speaking, where the rubber meets the road, reality is a function of trinary, the law of three, of trinary reality. So the fact that humanity still functions as human 2.0 in a binary space is why we can't get anywhere, is why we're stuck. And why you can watch brilliance, geniuses at work, working with the trinary expressions of the trinary paradigm, and you see what they're able to create. And then you see where humanity is stuck. And all that we can do with our binary stuff, there are computers, right? And that binary language, we can create artificial intelligence. We can create abominations of nature. And we can create all sorts of delusions and illusions and entertainments, like video games and stuff, to occupy us with. Okay. You guys probably want to see where this ends up, so I'll just let it play in the background. The last aspect that comes down to the trinary triunity methodology is the preservation and harnessing of the sexual force, the creative force. Because every time we fall into binary duality, we are divided and conquered, and our egos multiply themselves, they get stronger, they feed themselves on our sexual energy, our vital potency, our creative force. And no more is this more true than with animal sexuality. So indulging in the orgasm. And this is a tough one for many people to face, but if you want to make truly tremendous progress on the path, it's not a question of abstaining from sex. It's a question of practicing upright sexuality, practicing white tantra. Your sexual force is the Divine Mother Devi Kundalini Shakti. It is your creative force that you have to work with. This, what you're witnessing this artist make on that live, this is all a product of his creative energy. You have to put his creative energy, his focus, his attention into the creation of this particular vase. And that creative energy has the power to create a god, or it has the power to create a demon. And the choice is yours. But if that energy flows, but that energy can flow in one of two ways, right? It can flow up in Adam. That's Adam. Up in Adam, as in the Adam noose of the heart. Or it can flow down and out. And as we were saying earlier, an explosion is followed by an implosion. So an explosion through the orgasm leads to an implosion implosion in relationship, an implosion in, right? It's because it's an implosion of love, because what you're creating is lust. You're creating more lust. You're creating more demand, more desire for deeper and more powerful and more intense orgasms. The more pornography you watch, the more you get bored with it, the more extreme pornography you have to turn to, or you get bored of this type of sexuality with this type of partner. Now you got to go with a younger, right? You're not titillated anymore. You can't get it up anymore. You got to go more. It has to be more intense, more titillating, more, whatever. And an explosion of sexual energy leads to an implosion, a deterioration, a degeneration, a devolution of sexuality itself, and you end up in sexual degeneration. Which is why there are cults and entire industries dedicated to serving the cult of child sacrifice. Child sacrifice upon the altar of sexual gratification, sexual pleasure. Right? It's the big P word. But if you take that sexual energy and in upright sexuality, that's sex with meditation and prayer, abstention not from sexual intercourse, not from copulation, but abstention from orgasm, you can harness and utilize the creative force to illuminate all the chakras, and most importantly, for Divine Mother Devi Kundalini to raise up the spinal column and unite with her husband, the Holy Spirit, in the crown chakra, where the divine feminine unites with the divine masculine. And in that sacred union, the fires of divine feminine blend in immaculate conception with the fires of the divine masculine, and they give rise to the fire of fires and the light of lights and the being of beings of the cosmic Christ, who is the divine androgen. This, what we just described, and we started with this, right? But we're going to call this upright, or, here. People talk about Christ consciousness and the fact of the matter is that the Christ in us is an essence, is a seed. Our innermost intimate Christ is just a spark. In order for it to come alive, these two fires must unite. And that's what the tongues of fire atop the apostles' heads are in the Pentecostal fires. This is for a human being, a triune human being, the ultimate expression of triunity. Now, it's not for everybody. You don't have to go this route, but know that if you don't embrace this, you're going to make your journey of many lifetimes that much longer. And in addition to that, you don't know how many lifetimes you have left. We don't have unlimited lifetimes. Certainly not in the human dimension, in the human kingdom. but white tantra, this is many names, like super sexuality, white tantra. Oh, our penmanship is beginning to degrade here exponentially. White tantra. This is sexual alchemy. And the path of the razor's edge. Okay, so many ways to understand and describe this process. But if you do not practice the alm of life, if you focus only on sexual magic, oh yeah, that's the other. But it's important. We're talking about white magic here, not black magic, because this can be corrupted very quickly and easily into something very dark. Which is why typically it was never taught openly and publicly. It was always veiled in allegory. But once it got out in the open, it we began to teach it openly. Master Samael began to teach it openly because the White Lodge said, the Black Lodge has already taken it public, so we can't. There's no reason in trying to hide it anymore, keep it secret, because they lifted the veil on it. So, but all of this is present in symbol and allegory in all of the major world religions and all spiritual traditions. It's in fairy tales, it's in mythology, it's in nursery rhymes, it's in Shakespeare, it's in opera. You name it, we can point it to you. You will find it. But if you proceed in practicing white tantra without practicing the alm of life and the elimination of egos, then you will only accelerate the creation of a demon, the creation of an awakened demon, a Hasnamusin, and then an awakened demon. And not only that, the process of white tantra is, as we described, it's both creative and it's eliminating. So it's eliminating, and what it's creating are the solar bodies. But if you're not eliminating the egos while you're creating the solar bodies, then you will end up awake and having solar bodies created, but then you will have egos who will take advantage of those and will use those. And that's one of the ways. Remember at the very beginning, I said, how is it possible that demons can traverse the solar astral plane? And how can they get to angels? And how can they corrupt and tempt angels? Well, this is how. Because of many Hasnamusin, because of many who had developed solar bodies, and they were corrupted, they were tempted, corrupted, and duped by powerful demons who are Hasnamusin, and they have trapped inside of them an enlightened being, essentially, an awakened enlightened being, but trapped inside of a demon. Just comprehend what that might be like. And the name is not coming to it. Is it Moloch? No, is it Moloch? A very powerful demon. I think it's Baal. A very powerful demon, very powerful, like high up in the echelon of hierarchies, like one of the major demons is a Hasnamusin. Living within him, trapped within him, is an ascended master. But that ascended master can't escape and can't develop because the demon has complete control over him, has total possession of him, and has possession of all of his faculties. And we talked about this in our Hasnamusin video live stream that we did months and months ago now. So this is why I leave this always to the end or to the last, and I never share it outside of the context of all of the work that we have to do on our egos and the Alm of life in general, because that is more important to emphasize and to work on, and the transformation of impressions and becoming a triune human being. Work on being a triune human being first, then focus on being a triune lover, learning how to make love like the gods. But don't practice making love like the gods unless you intend to eliminate all of your demons. Because if you make love like the gods but don't eliminate your demons, what you're going to do is you're going to end up a very overpowerful demon. Take it from one who is possessed by a powerful demon and has spent the better part of his lifetime overcoming that demon. I'm nowhere out of the woods yet. I'm nowhere who I really am, right? But I'm here. I took on this burden so that I can be accessible and relatable to all of you who are all suffering in your own way, right? I'm not here walking on water. I'm not healing the dead and doing any of that stuff. I'm here suffering in hell right along with everybody else. Why? So that I can be living proof, that this stuff works, and that becoming a triune human being is possible. And it's an act of reconciliation. But I'm, still Attlas in formation. I still have a ways to go. So we're all taking this journey together. And that's the point. And that's the point. By the way, behind me is Poseidon, or I always forget whose is whose. Was it the Greeks had Neptune and the Romans had Poseidon, or was it the other way around? The Greeks had Poseidon, the Romans had Neptune. Regardless, you see his trident, right? Poseidon and Neptune, they're the gods of the deep. Oh, and then Triton, right? Triton is the same god. The god of the depths, the god of the deep, the god of the waters, the sexual waters. And their weapon is a trident. Because when we're dealing with the sexual waters and the fire that's extracted from the sexual waters, we're dealing, that fire of fires is that trinity, that triunity, that's God, masculine, feminine, and union. Krishna also carries a trident. It's the same symbol, right? And Krishna is, of course, the Hindu Christ. So, and Jesus is on the cross, and the cross is the same symbol. It's also a trident. Vertical masculine, horizontal feminine, and union. And a cross has 1, 2, 3 points pointed upward. Again, the Trinity, the triunity. So there's endless symbols that come into play here. And as I continue working on the video presentation for Human 3.0, the one that's intended for the general public, you will see many of these symbols coming together in the overarching and operative symbol that I will be using for Attlas Conscious Arts, which is to put forth to the world a campaign and an enterprise for upgrading humanity to a tri-unity paradigm, to human 3.0. Because we have to do this. Humanity has to do this. There's no other way. The binary modality, binary mentality, the binary paradigm will lead only to explosion and implosion, in other words, destruction. There's only one way to expand and synthesize salvation, and that's through the Christ. That's through the cross. That's through the Trinity, the triunity. And, well, we don't want to belabor the point or beat a dead horse at this point. Okay, let's final comments here. Benjamin said, in my ancestral tradition, anytime you saw a hummingbird, it was a sign from the gods that they are sending you a message about something. Okay, interesting. And he says, it would be nice to have a hummingbird analogy for the binary aspect. You saw a hummingbird, it was a sign from the gods that they're sending you a message about something, and you would want a hummingbird analogy for the binary aspect. Or, no, you mean the trinary aspect. You're not going to get a binary aspect out of a hummingbird. Well, just look at a bird, right? It's got two wings and its beak, and a tail. But if you look at a hummingbird, particularly, hummingbird doesn't have too much of a tail. It's got its wings, its two wings, and its beak. That to me is like a trinary. The beating of the wings, the up and down beating of the wings, you could call binary. But anyway, well, leave that with me. I'll see if I can come up with something better. Alex, is it cheating if you have a hummingbird feeder? Oh, yes, it is cheating. Don't do that. If you feed hummingbirds sugar water, you're basically going to turn them into addicts and they will die. It's like feeding a bear garbage. It's like feeding a bear junk food and you turn him into a garbage bear and he dies eventually because he'll stop looking for food in flowers. They become addicted. So don't do sugar water with hummingbirds. Instead, just plant them beautiful flowers. Like do a beautiful garden full of flowers, and the hummingbirds will come. But if you do a hummingbird feeder, yeah, it is cheating. Benjamin Ochoa says, that's right, Alex, some sort of messenger there. And he says, but a feeder could have good and bad fusions, still assists though. And he says, or I could look at it as a pyramid, the binary, but with no mortar, nothing to adhere the bricks together, therefore making it more objective and less or non-abstract. Well, of course, the Lemurians built their walls without mortar, and you can see them. They're still standing in Peru and in Japan. There's a fascinating aspect about stones is that stones will lock with each other. Stones locking are like human beings embracing or holding hands. You can lock stones together if they're oriented the right way. And it doesn't necessarily mean they have to fit like puzzle pieces, although the Peruvian and Japanese stonework do fit like puzzle pieces, but just regular stones will lock into place. Many bridges around Europe built by the Romans were built without mortar, and they're literally thousands of little round stones, and they're still standing, and they've been used for 2,000 years. And that's because the stones have been locked into place. And you can observe this. You can just go out in your garden, grab some stones, but you have to feel it. You have to sense and know, and do it with intention. And it's not a it's not a function of the rational mind. You got to feel into it. You got to let the stones tell you or show you which is up, which is down, which is their crown chakra, which is their root chakra, and how they're going to fit together. It's an art. It's an art. It really is. All stonework is because stones are alive, right? They're alive. They're just not alive in the same way that, mechanical science, materialist science thinks is life. Benjamin says, or conceptually, bingo. And Supin Kashper says, I got to thank you a lot because of your teachings. I went from regularly falling to falling once a month max. Words cannot express my gratitude. Well, you're welcome, Supin Kashper. This is an example of appreciation of all this time and energy and effort that I put into my life's work. To know if even one person has benefited, then that's an appreciation of what I do, and it makes it all worthwhile. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. We've come to the end, my friends. We've come to the end of another live stream. So I open it up for questions or comments or concerns. Today has yielded some very powerful new expressions for Human 3.0. This triangulation arrangement here. I'm going to be playing with that and putting this to good use. Maybe not in the video that I'm working on now, because this might be just too much, too involved for the general public. Because I'm working on a video that, it has to be usable in a crowdfunding campaign video. So this, I think, is getting too much into the weeds on first glance, but the interconnected nature of it, the triad nature of it, and I look forward to being able to use this in some kind of a presentation and then put it side by side with the what is it? The Zelda triad. Okay, what is it? What is it? Is the the Triforce. Yeah, can you guys see that? Let's see, Triforce, tools, and size large. There we go. Open link in UTab. There we go. Right? The Triforce. Zelda, Legend of Zelda, is one of the most beloved and popular computer role-playing franchises in history. And the Triforce is the operative symbol of from the Legend of Zelda. And today, that's what we have effectively shown here. The creation of gnosis, of self-evident experiential knowledge through consciousness, conscious expression, conscious inspiration, imagination, expression, perception, reception, digestion, extraction, appreciation, and creation of self-evident experiential knowledge, of gnosis. through comprehension. So this is now it becomes clear why this was made to be so universally beloved and popular, and its true esoteric meaning and its practical purpose. So I look forward to being able to put this into a video format, and or expressing this and teaching this in a in not such a messy presentation. But that's what I meant. Like, today yielded this because this is new. This is new. This was not premeditated in any sense, but certainly this was, because Zelda was from the 80s on Nintendo, right? The original Zelda. And then you had all the different versions of Zelda through all the different Nintendo consoles through the 80s and 90s and 2000s, and now the latest ones on the Nintendo Switch. I don't know if they're still using this symbol because I don't play Nintendo games. I don't, but this is this. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Because if not, I'll give you a minute or two to type away if you have anything to share or add. Or I was trying to find a background that had Triton, his head on one side, and then the trident on the other. But it's like it's impossible to find picture. Like, they're always in the middle, right? And the other thing too is that the tridents are always like off screen, right? Because I got to get one in letterbox to fit the background, but most of them are in portrait, or even the letterbox one. Like the Poseidon and Trident are like really small, and then the Trident is way up here, and it's like it's really hard to find a background that works. Even this one, like the Trident is cut off. You see, like it's but anyway, that's not important, but it's just, it is what it is. Benjamin says, thank Lear. Okay, so let's thank Lear and thank Shakespeare for writing Lear. Benjamin Raphael says, thank you for the fantastic live stream. Your knowledge and insights were incredibly valuable, and I truly appreciate your effort in sharing them with us. Well, thank you, Benjamin. Thank you also for sharing your Bible quotes, your biblical references. They were always much appreciated. Oh, Alex says, is your name Alex, or where does Alux come from? Okay, that's a good question. So, okay, so my name is Attila, right? I have an older brother named Alex, by the way. So, but where does Attlas come from? Well, if you take, let's say, Attila's project, and let's eliminate the I, and let's eliminate the apostrophe. So if we eliminate the ego and we eliminate attachment, you're left with the Attlas project. Now, Attlas, there's a rune. This is the rune. It's easier to draw it this way. This is the rune Otala or Otila. This is where you get Attila from. Otala or Attila in the Futhark, which is the runic alphabet. Otila comes at last. Just as Attlas comes at last for humanity. Allux, there's many, many, many things about this symbol, about this rune that I have to share, and I'll be sharing them more next week when I complete the video that I'm working on. Allux is Elux, which is God light, but all light, all lux, God light, and the light, Elux. The fire of fire, the light of lights, and the being of beings. Allux is synonymous with the Christ, the Logos. We can get more into this at some point in the future. There's actually so much in all of this that it's like, well, I'm trying to condense it all into a video that's less than 5 minutes. So I'm going to be putting that on my YouTube channel, and as soon as it's done, I'm going to be premiering it live on my live stream. Hopefully, it'll be done by next week, but no promises, because it's always more difficult to make something short and condense than it is to, like, the first version of this video was over 20 minutes. So Alex is asking, what language is this from? The Otala, well, the Futhark is the Norse alphabet, but it's universal. The Futhark is universal, the runes. It was used by the Norse. It was used by the Aztec, and it was used by also the Hungarians, among others. Now, Attila is Hungarian, but Attila derives from Otala, but it's just the pronunciation and the spelling in Latin letters is Attila. But the original alphabet of the original alphabet of the Hungarians was were the runes. So our original alphabet was runic. So that's where Otila comes from. But Attila is a Hungarian name. It comes from Attila the Hun. And Alex says, yeah, that's funny. My middle name is Mikhail, right? That one is Mikhail, right? The one who is with God. Mikhail is one of the archangels, one of the cosmo creators. Joanne asks or says, just want to say thank you very much. As always, a deeply impacting teaching that gives one dense nutrition for the soul and spirit. I really enjoyed it. Bless you, brother. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you for being here as always. Benjamin Ochoa says, thanks. Learned a lot. See you next week. Sorry, I'm on my scooter typing. Don't be typing on your scooter when you're driving, when you're riding your scooter. But thank you, Benjamin. Thank everyone. And yes, Mikhail, one who is with God. Okay. If there's nothing else, thank you all for joining in. I look forward to seeing you all again next week. And hopefully, like I said, I'll have more on Otala and on Atlas Conscious Arts and everything that we're working on. And hopefully I'll have it condensed down and have that very impactful, very dense, very powerful video presentation, which should be under 5 minutes, touch wood. So again, thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful week. Take care as always, and upgrade yourself, update yourself moment by moment. Pay attention, transform impressions, be a triune human being. Upgrade yourself to human 3.0. Thank you and blessings. And as always, as Shupen Kashper is wishing everyone, have a wonderful week. And as always, inferential peace. Take care, everyone.